thank you so much for coming out on a Saturday morning to be with us today. We're very, very grateful, and thank you for having us. So, as Benny suggested in Benny's introduction, Rosie and I have worked together, and I helped Rosie write her fantastic book, Hope, which you would have all seen around you.
She had a little bit to do with it.
A little bit to do with it. Rosie, we've done a few of these in conversations over the last couple of months since the book has been out, and I've had the great privilege of working with you many times in this sort of setting. The one question we always get asked during the Q&A, so we're going to get it right out of the way now before it always begins. How are your dogs and your donkeys?
They are my best little friends, I will say, and I do miss them, but they're with their dog walker right now, and I think they like her better than me. It's a bit of a worry when your dogs are just so excited and run off without a second backward glance. But yeah, they're doing well. One of them's got an abscess, but it's only a minor thing. Yeah.
They're going to have their own Instagram profiles very soon. The life of Rosie's dogs. Rosie, on to the more serious side of our conversation today. This is your second book, Hope, your first book, A Mother's Story, which I have a feeling that many of you will have read, and I'm seeing lots of nodding around the room. A Mother's Story detailed what happened in your life in the lead up to the murder of your beautiful boy, Luke, a moment in Australian history that I'm sure all of you remember very well. You wanted to write a second book, but the format that we've got, this wasn't the book that you wanted to write, was it? We had a few moments along the way. We're just giving you a little insight into the writing process here. And of course, none of this goes out of the room after, right? We're all here.
No, well, I have to say that I'm not sure how many years ago it is now that Melbourne was in 2 years pretty much of lockdown. And in that time, I don't think I thought anybody remembered who I was or would be interested in my story. So for me, as I was thinking what I would do next, was really I wanted to share other people's stories. And I'd done a series on the ABC, which was 1+1, where I really interviewed some accidental heroes, people who had stepped up and done some amazing things. And really that was my vision for the book, was a little bit about me, but mostly about other inspiring people that give you hope when you actually, understand their journey and what they do with their life. And so I think that with Sue, what has happened is the book has landed at a very, very good time, and it is the right book at the right time. So sometimes you can be wrong and admit that you're in the hands of a really good writer who knows how to bring everything together and had the confidence in me, I guess, the confidence I lacked.
I think one of the things that became very clear to me when we set out on this project was Rosie's untold story. So the original vision of the book was to interview all of the people that had inspired Rosie along the way and had given her hope throughout her journey. But very quickly it became clear to me that there was much more to Rosie's story that needed to be told, and that was really in what had happened to her after she became Australian of the Year, because of course we've seen Rosie on TV and in speeches delivering incredibly powerful moments and change for our nation, but behind the scenes there was a toll and a price that took, and I felt that story was really the most powerful story and needed to be told. So for those of you that might not have read the book yet, the book is about what happened in Rosie's own journey after she became Australian of the Year, and we have still been able to weave through those the people that inspired you along the way.
I think that was the really great compromise. It really still includes some amazing stories of those people that touched me. Through knowing them, helped me to understand that, through this darkest of times, the worst of times, I could see light, I could see hope, and I knew that I would at some point be able to get there. And I think that we've done a really, the book lands really well, and I think all of those stories are sometimes uncomfortable to sit in, and difficult to read, but I think you'd all agree when you read them that they needed to be told, and we learn a lot through those people.
Absolutely. So let's go back a little, Rosie. 10 years, in fact. It's been 10 years this year since Luke passed away. The day after Luke died, you stood in front of the media. You walked out of your house to the waiting media pack, and you made a profoundly moving and eloquent statement to all of the cameras and to the waiting media. And part of that statement you said, family violence happens to everybody, no matter how nice your house is or how intelligent you are. It happens to anyone. How did that moment change your life, and what do you think it was about those words that struck a chord? Because the reaction was immediate, wasn't it?
Yes, and I think, if I never did anything else other than speak to the media that day, I would have still had a profound effect. And I think you being a journalist, you also recognise what changed at that moment, and that was really... the journalists there that day certainly hadn't expected the mother of the son who'd been murdered to come out to speak to them. So they were astonished and surprised. And when they invited me to say something, it was the first time that somebody had been able to put it into the context of family violence. And so what it really did was change the way the media began to report on family violence. Up until that point, really, it never made the headlines. It was that Australia's dirty little secret that was kept behind closed doors, where the shame was placed on the victim and the family and not the perpetrator. And the fact that I am white, middle class, was the reason I was seen, the reason I was heard, and the reason everyone was shocked. If I'd have been an Aboriginal woman, if I'd been a woman of colour, if I'd been any other type of woman, it wouldn't have shocked the nation as it did. So those elements were unique in a way, and gave the opportunity, I guess, to say something. And I didn't know how long that would last, but I very quickly became compelled, and perhaps it was through shock. It certainly wasn't with any great understanding of what was ahead. But this was a moment in time for me to be able to speak to journalists and shine a light on it, to try to make sure that Luke didn't die in vain and other people weren't going to go through the same pain as myself. So 10 years later, the media is still interested, and unfortunately, family violence is still a horrendous social issue that we sit with. And as you know, because you're no doubt watching your TV like I do every day, this year has been catastrophic, and we have one woman a week, one woman every 4 days has been murdered, and some really brutal murders that have really stopped you in your tracks and wonder, has anything changed at all? So this book has been a really well-received book for many in the family violence sector who are exhausted and overwhelmed and continually striving against great odds to keep working to protect women and children, educate and influence all of us to be able to understand what a huge problem we are living with. So sometimes it can seem we haven't gone anywhere, nothing has changed, but indeed it has. And this book helps me to see where we were 10 years ago when I first started to speak out. You know, I wasn't the first person. There's been decades of women and organisations who have fought for women's equality and for our safety and for this to be recognised as a problem for a very long time. And it's exhausting and unrelenting. And we do need to come together and hope that there is change occurring because, you know, too many people are affected. Absolutely.
So as we know and as history tells us, less less than a year after Luke died, and you think about that moment in time, Rosie had lost her son under the most horrific circumstances, and less than a year later, you were standing on the podium as our Australian of the Year, which is quite a remarkable feat. Before you, the honour of Australian of the Year went to people that was largely bestowed upon academics or Hollywood movie stars or sports figures, high-profile military types.
Clearly not people like me.
You were the first, I mean, in want of a better word, you were the first real person that became the Australian of the Year.
She did say ordinary at one point.
I did not say ordinary. I would never say ordinary. It's not, I would never say ordinary, Rosie, but I do have it scratched out here. Real, first real person. She's not ordinary, let me tell you. To have this honour. So, I mean, theoretically, you could have taken that very lovely, enormous glass sculpture and put it in your suitcase.
It's a very heavy award.
And gone home and not breathed another word about it. But in fact, you threw yourself into it. Were you emotionally ready for what's to come? And can you share with the audience today a little of what it is like when you become Australian of the Year, unless there's any other Australians of the Year in the room? No.
Nobody could have prepared me, and nobody did. It is an amazing honour. And somebody once said to me, once you're Australian of the Year, Rosie, you're always Australian of the Year. And I think that's really been true. People still hold me in such great regard, and it's been an amazing journey, a very bittersweet one, but an amazing journey. And I always kept saying, nobody's making me do any of this. This is me wanting to do it. But ultimately, overnight, you are besieged by media. You are quoted, and everything you say reverberates. It's a huge responsibility because your words matter and they have influence. And for me, I realised so many people needed change, and they had so much expectation and hope attached to me with this national platform. It was an opportunity to create a momentum for change. And what I wanted to do was make sure that that couldn't be stopped. And so I did create those opportunities. I did have a little bit of imposter syndrome, I have to say, and that really never leaves you. But so I think I was really determined to do the very best I could. And so in that year alone, I spoke at over 250 events and reached around about 70,000 people, and that was at conferences, community events, speaking to professional people that I felt should be more informed, should be better skilled, should be more understanding that the clients they have, the customers they serve, the staff they have in their organisation. There's 1 in 3 women experiencing violence, then we all have a role to play in understanding what we can do better. Next year I spoke at 180 events, and then I stopped counting. But I've had the opportunity to travel into remote Aboriginal communities, visit so many regional towns, and everywhere I went, it was an opportunity to work with the community to basically raise the work that was being done in that area. And I had an amazing time, but it was really very exhausting. And when I look back, it doesn't come with a stipend, it doesn't come with money, it doesn't come with a team of support people. So you've got to try and find some of those things very, very quickly. And it's really a lot on those people around you as well. So, yeah, it's still one of the most exciting times of my life.
You paved the way.
I paved the way. And then I can remember David Morrison was the next person. He goes, oh my God, Rosie, what have you done? Because it kind of, it puts pressure on the next one to have to do the same.
And in that year alone, you reached more than 70,000 people with the talks that you did. And each of these talks, these were the 250 that Rosie referenced, were without all of the media interviews that she would do every single day. So when you'd fly into a small country town, there would be sometimes 3, 4, 5 media interviews along the way. It was non-stop.
Radio stations.
TV, all of which I found while we were researching the book. We had lots of fun conversations. I'd say, Rosie, do you remember saying blah, blah, blah? I did not say that. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You told Outback New South Wales Radio. So we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But in that year, at the end of that year, after all of your work, among many accolades that you've received, you were named by Forbes magazine, the international magazine, as one of the world's most influential people. And I'll just say the world's most influential people, alongside the Pope.
Pretty astonishing, isn't it? I can still remember thinking, oh, my parents would really like a plaque. So I sent off for a plaque for them, and it went from America directly to England. And all I could hear from them was moaning because they had to pay for it. World's 50th greatest leader, and no, they were moaning because they had to pay for the plaque. Or not the plaque itself, they had to pay for the
transport.
Yeah.
And we can only imagine that somewhere in the Vatican, someone's saying, hey, Pope, you've been named alongside Rosie Batty. Wouldn't that be a fantastic thing? Of course, all of this, Rosie, comes at a price. You've been very, very public. You're one of the most prolific public figures that we've seen in a very long time. In November 2015, you were invited to address a joint sitting of Victorian Parliament, inspired by the coroner's report into Luke's death. Now, to paint some picture here, regular parliamentary sittings are never, ever put aside, but in this particular case, it was a joint sitting of both houses in which the entire business of Victoria was put aside for a day to discuss family violence. This was something that had never happened before. You made a beautiful speech, and all 127 of the MPs in attendance that day rose to their feet, except one. And the next day, when the story should have been about domestic violence, it was in fact, the headlines were all about that MP and him not standing up. And it showed what had become, I guess, the dark side of your time in public life, because it wasn't always support and encouragement. And I just want to read a couple of these. Are a few of the comments that came up in the story immediately after. And this is just a couple of several thousand. This woman should stop crying and trying to make a career out of her son's death. I know, right? Batty has captured the hard feminist left. I'm sick of the male bashing in our so-called enlightened society. Australian of the Year, is this the best we can do? Why we allow such extremists to have a high place in our society is beyond me. I'm getting sick of seeing her poor me face in the media. And this one from a fellow lovingly named Aussie Reg. Good on you, Reg. Rosie Batty, milking her family tragedy for all it's worth. But now, New South Wales, you people have a lot to answer, because that was only the beginning of them. We have Mark Latham, who's become, yeah, right, it's all your fault. Oh, he's not from Victoria. And this is just one of the inches and inches and inches of column space that Latham has dedicated to Rosie, in a kind of weird obsession, frankly. She's wheeled out at business functions to retell the story of her son's murder. This is one of my pet gripes about modern society, the way in which serious issues and events are converted into bizarre forms of celebrity. I bet you didn't know that you're a celebrity, Rosie. Seemingly, there's nothing left in the relationship between people that can't be commercialised and cashed out as entertainment. It's no surprise why women don't like to go into the public eye, but how on earth did this impact you? I mean, this underbelly, when the rest of Australia was praising your efforts, there was this dark, dark side to your life in public eye. How did you cope?
Well, it's still there because any woman who's in a public position, whether it's a journalist or politician or anybody really, there is always judgment and there is always opinion, and some of it's really very unpleasant and sometimes really quite harmful. And so I guess you learn not to go looking for it, which means you rarely go on any online publication to look at an article that's written about you or with you or for you, because the very commentary that will come will be a lot of positive, but then there will inadvertently be a deterioration. And often I think that is very definitely deliberate and provocative, and it's set to be such. So, the best thing you can do is not look. My experience of people is they're incredibly encouraging, incredibly warm, incredibly kind. And I've experienced the best of humanity through the worst of circumstances. And I continue to. I can be at the airport and somebody say, "You Rosie." I mean, how nice is that people recognise me and feel comfortable that they can just say, something really nice to me, and then off we go again. And I think that is a lovely thing that I really appreciate. I don't meet the people that hold these dark views. I don't think I'd have a problem meeting them, but I'm not sure where they are. But I think that they're, at home and probably not doing anything much with their life to improve humanity. Those are the people that can sit safely at home being critical and judgmental of everyone else, but actually not doing a lot for themselves. So I think, the things that have hurt me at different times are when it's local knowledge, when you realise that somebody has seen you in a cafe locally or crossing the road or something, and it makes you realise that even if you don't realise people have noticed you, some people have noticed you and they want to interpret something that's quite ordinary and use it in a way that can be seen as some kind of malicious way of hurting you or your reputation. So you realise not everybody understands what you do. They don't understand why you do it. And we mentioned in my book about Lindy Chamberlain, when she had her baby stolen by a dingo, we didn't believe her. And because she was stoic, we condemned her. And so she lost 3 years of her life in prison. And I thought of her a lot because the night that Luke was murdered, the police were amazing. And they reassured me and let me know this was a premeditated act. This was not your fault. So that has always sat with me. But, with Lindy, I can't imagine, she had a newborn baby. And because we couldn't believe the possibility of a dingo taking that baby, we blamed her. I don't know that we blamed her, the father, but we certainly blamed Lindy. And all I can think is, through the grief of that tragic loss and the horror and trauma of it, she was also condemned. So for me to have had this horrendous thing happen, to lose the love of my life and the purpose of my life and everything I had thought I had ahead of me, I had experienced a lot of love, a lot of support, an amazing kindness. So, for me, it's really making sure that the perspective continues to be overwhelmingly positive, and some of those negative undertones that you just have to accept that you can't change, and continue to just be the best person you can be, doing what you believe is what you is right for you, because no one gets a rule book about grief. No one gets a plan and a blueprint to say this is the way to do it, and life is going to get there and it's going to be okay. You know, I chose to channel my grief in this way. I never saw it as a distraction, but I can look back now over those years and realise I was grieving as much as I could bear, but I didn't realise there was pain yet that was deeper and that I needed to be able to face. And that came when I was ready. And that came many years later. But I think, you know, that's where people get suspicious, because they think, well, if she loved her son and he died in that brutal way, one, why didn't she protect him, and what was she doing to cause it? Because truly she didn't do enough. And then the other was, you know, that they would anticipate someone perhaps being, you know, in a home with shutters and not stepping out in public and not being able to function and move forward in life, because you can't imagine that it's possible to live, because when we have children, we love them so much. We do everything to protect them. Everything that we do is for them and because of them, and they give us the purpose we need sometimes to do really mediocre work and just get through the day. So, you know, this is how I channeled my grief. I can't imagine who I would be now if I hadn't. And I'm really fortunate for the experience and the opportunities. You know, I haven't just been given them. I realise I've been able to create them. And that's, you know, my skills, my personality, the way that I am, has been able to do this. And for many, they can't, or they don't want to, and they do different things. You know, some people, and in my book, have transcended their tragedy in ways, through writing, through art, through many different ways. So we do what we can.
Some of the feedback and the correspondence did come to you directly, though, didn't it? I mean, in among the thousands and thousands and thousands of letters that you received, because of course Rosie back then was in the phone book and very accessible.
You remember the phone books?
Back in the day. And
really, that's crazy. It's only 10 years ago. What happened to those phone books? Yeah.
And there was one particular series of letters that arrived to you that really struck a chord, didn't they?
Well, not only was I was in the phone books. That was my address. I mean, really, when we think about the breach of confidentiality now, wow. So, if you've got any old phone books, then I'm still in there probably. So there's your address. My mobile number wasn't in there, but my landline number was. And at some point, I did remember picking up the phone and somebody speaking to me in a way that was sick. And that shocked me. And then at some point, you can't remember time frames particularly, but at some point there was an article in the paper, and it was a woman that had been murdered walking home and her name was Jill Marr. And that was a really other pivotal time in Victoria too, where another woman was murdered, stalked on her way home. And I had an article in the paper at the same time, and so this person wrote to me. And I opened the letter, because I was getting lovely letters and cards, and people sent beautiful things to me in the mail, you know, crystals and lots of different things. And this letter came, and it was handwritten, and it was quite disgusting. And it shocked me. And then I got a second one. And I thought, I need to go to the police. This is, you know, the language of this person involved animals. So I can only say that it was very sick. So I took it to the police. And then I got a third one. And was fairly furious to find out that the police hadn't done anything with the other two letters. They were waiting to see if it happened again. So they got told very, very directly that I hadn't expected them to be sitting on these letters. So they did investigate, and they did find the person, and much to my amusement, I found out he was a man in his 70s in an old people's home. And then all of a sudden I thought, well, he's not a real threat. And it's not funny, but anyway, before he could get charged, he did die. So
justice was served in its own unique way.
I don't know what to say. I probably shouldn't have shared that bit. But yeah, it was...
but one can only imagine what it must have been like for all the people who shared that nursing home with old Bob. He must have been an absolute hoot of a fellow to be around.
But I will say that when I think about now, I'm very concerned if people know where I live. You know, I would now, I would be... The thought that I was in a phone book, that anybody could come to my home at any time, makes you really worried, because you're not necessarily safe, and my life has been threatened. And so, social media is a dangerous place, as we know. So I do think, I can make a bit of fun of that, but really, it's quite off-putting and quite unsettling. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, one of, I guess, the lovely things that come out of this entire situation is the influence that you have been able to wield. And you have literally, I know, in your phone, you have the number of every Prime Minister and just about every influential person in Australia. And
not every Prime Minister.
Well, not Scott Morrison.
That's the
He
truth.
never phoned, did he?
No, he didn't phone.
He probably should have.
He
You should have given you a call.
He should have asked his wife, and she would have said it was a good idea.
Jenny
to
could have phoned you. She might ring now. Who knows, Rosie? But what you have been able to achieve through those connections that you've built, and perhaps most profoundly, is that you have changed the conversation about family violence, and the fact that you're all here this morning and we're able to have a conversation about family violence it's no longer happening behind closed doors, which is really quite profound. You took this influence and you really wanted to create something of a legacy for Luke, and you created the Luke Batty Foundation, which was remarkable, and particularly the Never Alone campaign, which many of you will have seen. Now, the foundation eventually closed, and you described that moment as really like losing Luke all over again, and yet your achievements in that time, and I'm going to read, this is just a small list of Rosie's achievements that particularly came out of the foundation. So in January of last year, Daniel Andrews, the former Victorian Premier, had implemented all 227 recommendations of the Royal Commission, which is staggering.
So it was the country's first Royal Commission into family violence, and it's created massive change in Victoria. There is still a lot of work to do. It's still not a perfect system, but it is over and above, progressed the work in Victoria, and so I'm really proud of all that work, because every day I just know how hard people work, and how much they have to deal with. And even in Victoria, we still have 200 families every night in a motel because we haven't got enough refugees for them to go to. And that is not a safe place. That is not a place that women and their children can be properly cared for and supported. So there is still a long way to go. But like I said, with having a Royal Commission, there was much that other states in Australia can learn from and benefit from. So we continue to be hopeful. I met with your New South Wales government recently, and I think that they got a bit of a kick in the ass, bit hot, because it was made obvious to them through media pressure that they were $200 and something million less in their funding than Victoria, which for a state that has a higher population is really quite shameful. So I think there's a lot of political pressure, rightly so, and you as a community need to keep them under that pressure, because it really is an area of work that is gross. There's always been underfunded, and the organisations that work in that area are just overwhelmed.
Among the other list of achievements, and these are only small ones that I've cherry-picked for this, but the Respectful Relationships program, which was very dear to your heart, has now been embedded into the curriculum of 1,950 schools. And since Luke's death, $3.7 billion has been invested into the prevention of family violence, which is a staggering amount. At the time the foundation closed, you said that you felt like it was like losing Luke all over again. But the legacy, I mean, Rosie, just on paper, and you know there's much more than what we're dealing with here today, but when you look back now, are you proud of what you've achieved? How do you feel about what you have contributed to the narrative?
I don't think I'll ever fully appreciate all the accolades that people seem to direct towards me. You know, all I strive to do is really support many organisations and people that I know are doing amazing work, and using my influence as best I can to support that work. So, you know, I just know that unfortunately we're going to have another woman worded next week, because inevitably somebody else is going to be confronted with a pain, whether it's their community, whether it's their family, whether it's their work colleagues. And it's such a devastating, it's just so devastating. And so I guess whilst those things keep happening, you can never really celebrate all the achievements. You just got to really appreciate, I think, as fully as you can, where we have come from. And where we have come from is a time where there was no support, where women of previous generations had absolutely no one to reach out to, where the police weren't interested because they didn't see it as real police business, where there were no refugees. So every single thing that we have now has been hard fought for. And so I still see we have a long journey ahead, but we are making progress. We will continue, because there is no going back. There is only going forward. And I think, you know, I would love to be able to say there's a simple solution and you do this and it fixes everything. There isn't. It's a complex issue that has always been here. And it requires every single one of us, no matter who we are, to be part of that change.
I think one of the things that we have discussed at various times, and from a media lens, is the shift in media, which has been quite profound. No longer are we seeing the headlines of, he was such a great bloke, but he just did the wrong thing, or snapped, or the headlines that were all very much focused on the perpetrator and, you know, great local guy kills his family, you know, all of this sort of stuff has really changed exponentially, and we just don't see that anymore. And changing the media and the way media spoke about domestic violence has really been something that you've worked very hard on and you have achieved.
Yeah, well, I was going to say there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work, and I think that, you know, it's really an uncomfortable truth that, you know, women are predominantly murdered by the men that are supposed to love and protect them or care for them. And so that has been a very uncomfortable truth, which we are now openly discussing and talking about. And so I think, you know, this is not just a woman's problem. This is a man's problem. And it's really great to see men here today, because we're all allies. We want these changes. We want these changes for our children and our grandchildren. We want our young girls to grow up without assuming the responsibility for their own safety, like we all have. Like we just know that it's up to make sure that your car's not parked in the shadows and you're going into a vulnerable place, you know, and then you get murdered in a shopping centre. You know, so punishing people and condemning them or judging them because they didn't stay safe enough. What was she doing wearing that? She should never have had too much to drink. Why would you walk to the car late at night? You shouldn't have gone jogging with your headphones on. You know, we are now shifting that blame. And we are asking, why is more not being done to the person who's choosing to be violent? Why are we not making them accountable? Why does a woman have to leave, find a refuge, disrupt her life and that of her kids? Why do we have to take the responsibility for our safety? So there's a lot of shifting of expectation, and I think that, you know, those are all subtle, gradual demonstrations of societal change. It's not fast enough, and it's certainly not fast enough for those who are at risk and are in danger, and may always have to live like that, may never be truly safe, and may never be able to relax in the way that we take for granted. So, you know, really appreciation just how tough it is, and just how tough it is for certain types of women as well, because of their visa status, because of the culture they come from, where they're incredibly isolated and really don't have any supports, and even government support to survive without having a home, without having adequate food. It's, you know, my life was tough enough after losing Luke. I can't imagine how so many keep going with the strength that they have. You know, victims are not submissive, passive, weak little things. Their strength, their resourcefulness, their determination, there's a whole stack of strengths and characteristics that are amazing.
Let's shift the dial slightly, because one of the things that people do love hearing about is the other side of your personal life. And one of the things that you have...
There's nothing exciting. I have no... other than my dogs and my donkeys.
One of the things that has given you a great sense of joy, happiness in your life has been your walking. And anyone who follows Rosie on social media, we follow your walking adventures. Tell us about the walks, what you've done, where you've been, and what those walks have brought to you in that sense of healing.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, I talked about Australian of the Year, doing 250 talks, and then the following year 180, and then the third year stopped counting. But I think by the time of that third year, that was a tough year. That was the year where I really didn't know whether I wanted to keep living. I didn't think about killing myself. I just couldn't see that I was ever going to feel okay again. And so, you know, sometimes people think the worst of the time is at the time, but the journey of pain and grief is a long one. And there isn't, you know, there isn't a rule book for people around you to know how to help and support you either, and what to say and what to do. But friends of mine were going back to the UK, which is where my family live, and they were doing the coast to coast walk, which is from one side of the England to the other, through the Lake District, the Yorkshire Dales, and the Yorkshire Moors. And I said, I'm coming, because I've always wanted to do some of the famous walks around the world. So we took 22 days to do that walk, and I think that's where I started my recovery. It was really hard. The Lake District is not flat, and it rains a lot. And the water was ferocious. It was very comical.
And had you trained enough for this walk,
I never
Rosie?
train enough. And I've realised I'm getting too old to not train because I don't bounce along like I once did. So it was tough. It was stunningly beautiful. And it really helped me reconnect with England. You know, I go often, I go a lot, but I'm like many. I fly along the motorways and get to from A to B. But walking along in England, along the hedgerows, noticing the different berries, the different wildflowers, the quaintness and quintessential English countryside, it was stunning. And all I had to do is get up in the morning, have a hearty breakfast and walk for, 15 or 20 kilometres and get to my accommodation, which was mostly in a pub, actually, and have a gin and tonic at the bar and a hearty meal and then get up and do the next day. And I think I so enjoyed it, and I've realised that I need to make time to have other walks to look forward to and to plan towards. So I went to Cornwall last year, and again, hadn't trained enough. It was incredibly hot. Who would have thought in England it was over 30 degrees? It was nearly killed me. But again, another part of England, stunning scenery, went with good friends, and I've realised it's, just a very important thing that I can do. And I think most people who are drawn to doing understand the benefits. It really kind of gives you a circuit breaker. It simplifies your life. You are challenging yourself safely enough. And the elements sometimes, are not favourable. Sometimes you're walking through weather that's wet and rainy, and other times it's sunny. And, so I'm not sure where I'm going next. But
you found a sense of peace and a sense of comfort during those walks. It was a little bit unexpected, probably.
Yeah. Well, I guess I trekked in Nepal before I had Luke. I know just exactly how amazing walking is, and the amazing countryside you'll find yourself in, and you appreciate it so much more. And I'm now in my 60s, and I realise that what you don't use, you lose. So you've got to keep going. And poles become your best friend. And those poles can mean you can go for a lot longer, until you're a lot older as well.
Now, I'm acutely conscious of time, and obviously Rosie and I could sit here and chat with you all day, but there are other people who need to come onto this stage as well. This, for us, we've done a number of these talks since the book has been out, but this is actually our last talk for the time being, and Rosie's heading home for a much overdue visit with her family in England in the coming weeks.
And I'm not walking anywhere.
She's walking to the pub for a gin and tonic, and that's it.
Be walking around the village.
So normally there will be a little bit of time for questions after this, but normally we just sort of wrap things up and away we go. But Rosie, given that this is our last chat for a while, I think it's only fair that you have the last word here. Would you?
I always have the last word.
Would you like to have a little read of?
Sure. And look, finding the right writer to work with you on bringing together a book that you can be proud of and that you hope that people are going to really get a lot from. It's been really good to have Sue come into my life, and
she says it now after we've done and published.
And some of the early stages, being made to go back over things that you don't ever want to talk about again is hard. And and at times when you're not tracking quite so well, and around the anniversary of Luke's death is always a sensitive time for me. So it takes great sensitivity and persistence and a lot of guts, really, to poke people when you don't know what their reaction is going to be. But Sue has pulled together a book with me and for me that I could never have done on my own, and I couldn't have done it without her. And I think the words that it's like it comes from me too, but the last few paragraphs I think are really very sensitively written, and it's hard for me to say them without my voice wavering. So forgive me if I get emotional, and I'll excuse you if you start sobbing into your tissues. So by the time you are reading this, I will have just passed the 10-year anniversary of Luke's death. It's a date I dread. How will I mark it? Who knows? I know that day will be difficult, as will the weeks leading up to it. I know that I will have moments when I'm not myself, where I'm perhaps short with others, where I'm quiet or introverted, and that's okay. For a long time, my life was utterly overwhelming as I wrestled to keep on top of my day-to-day existence. Finding contentment and mindfulness has not been easy, but it's achievable, and they are precious mental assets. I know when I need to slow down, breathe, and above all else, be kind to myself. I'm trying to tip the scales in favour of being more generous in spirit and kindness and support. I want to be more thoughtful, more compassionate. I want to nurture more of those qualities I have, the qualities that made me the best mother and friend to Luke that I could be. I want that part of me to be more, so there is less room for negativity and self-doubt. Life is a precious and wondrous thing, and we should make the most of every day. When I accepted the honour of becoming Australian of the Year, I said that Luke did not die in vain and will not be forgotten. I said he was beside me and with me every step of the way, and he is. Luke is with me. He guides me, he inspires me, and sometimes he carries me. Similarly, Australians have lifted me up and carried me when I've needed them to, and when I've expected it, and when I've least expected it. The courage, friendship, and grace of others, often from complete strangers, has given me strength and hope to continue moving forward and find meaning and light in my life. Thank you for walking beside me, for carrying me when I needed it, for lifting me up when I least expected it, and for allowing me to honour my son with the strength of a nation's love supporting me. I felt it, I feel it. You've given me hope.
Please thank Rosie Batty.
I'm crying. Thank you so much. I think for many of us who have been here before, that has to be one of the best talks we've ever had. You did an amazing, Rosie, from all of us. I think you give us hope, which is a great reward. And Sue, thank you. That was a beautiful time together, and we're very, very blessed and very honoured. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
And we have a fabulous walk here called the Great North Walk, and I think we'd all love to join you.
Good. I'll be back.
Okay, good. We have some time for some Q&A. Please, very, very short, one at a time. Here you go.
Thanks, Benny. Thank you, Rosie, for your incredible work. You can't have safe children without a safe mum. And our New South Wales press at the moment seems to have a huge emphasis on what's happening to the women without much notice of the short and profound long-term effects on children. Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right. And as much as I'm really thankful for all the work that has happened in Victoria, there's the biggest gap still is recognising children in their own right, and our systems are still not set up to do that effectively or properly. And I think that is a very recognised gap that is needs a lot of serious investment and direction. So you're absolutely right. I think it's for us to resolve this issue. we have to acknowledge the children who are not necessarily guaranteed to become perpetrators or victims in their own right, but a higher proportion and whose lives are impacted and the trauma that creates. So we really do need to do a lot more in that space. And there's still a long way to go. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. I believe you had a question.
Thank you, I'm Patricia. I'm just interested in how you found each other and when.
Very good question.
I can give you. Well, I do a lot of writing for various places, and I was writing a story for Women's Weekly about Rosie, which was lovely, for our Women's Weekly's Christmas issue. And it was all about how Rosie was going and her sense of hope. And we got along really well, but like most things, at the end of it, it's kind of like, hang on, there's much more to what's going on with Rosie than meets the eye. So we wrote this lovely piece for Women's Weekly, which was very, positive and all those wonderful things. But
they make you look lovely. They
and she
dressed
looked
you in
fabulous.
beautiful clothes, and it took me down to Flinders and did a photo shoot of this amazing home. And I'm thinking, people are going to think I live here. Not my clothes, not my house, not my jewellery.
It was very fabulous. And we were, in the course of the conversations, Rosie had said to me that she was contemplating a second book, and she'd been thinking about this second book for a long time, and that was how we sort of came together. And Rosie had an idea of how the book was to be, and then I steamrolled in and said, absolutely no. That's not how it's going to be, Rosie. You've got a story to tell. And it was difficult at times. I really did press Rosie's buttons quite hard a lot of times. But I think it's really important that people see, as a journalist, I could see that there was a whole other story there that needed to be told. And
I think even with my first book, which has been a bestseller for some time, and it's sold over 62,000 copies, and that was years ago when I last checked. When Luke was first killed, and one of the letters I received was from HarperCollins inviting me to write a book. And I thought, I don't read quite as much, always an avid reader. From the moment my mum died when I was 6, reading for me was something I would retreat into a quiet corner at school, into my bedroom, and I would read. And throughout my life, at very challenging and difficult times, I've taken solace in books, books on spirituality, books on all elements of learning about life and people, and they've been very healing for me. I used to go into bookshops and not be entirely sure what I'd come away with. I'd loiter around various sections and come out with armfuls, and know that book was the right book at that time for me to retreat into and read from page to page. So for me to have my own book, I knew it was a real honour. There's a lot of people want to write books, they'll self-publish, and they'll never get the opportunities, even though they may have a better story than mine on many levels. So I really treasured that opportunity and knew I needed someone to do it with me and for me, because how do you work out what's interesting in your life to put in? And I think, if I look at other people, I realise, biography or something, it's the very ordinariness of the person that you're most interested in, not necessarily these amazing parts, but the very ordinaries. Where did I live? Where did I, born? Who, what was my life? So for me, with this one, I again approached it with the same lack of confidence. Who would be that interested in me? Who actually is going to buy it? What kind of person is going to be interested in me? Are they still going to remember me? And as Sue explained, we do need to revisit what happened to you and Luke, because some people won't have read my first book and may not know my full story. So to go back into those spaces was uncomfortable, because I wrote that first book, so I'd never had to do it again. And even though I do talk a lot, there are elements of that journey that I don't want to talk about, that are still will always be very painful. And I think, you know, you respect that. But
Absolutely.
to get the best book possible, you know, and often my memory, I was like, oh my God, I can't even remember. How do you know I did that?
We had a lot of arguments. I'd put something, Rosie, I never said that. And I said, no, you actually did. No, I did not.
Because-
No, yes, you did.
Because I don't write my speeches. And so when I hear them back, I hear the clumsiness of some of the way I've articulated something. And you wouldn't say it like that again. But in the moment, that's what, you know, that's the way I relate to people, and it works. But when you hear it back, you go, oh, I would say it a bit differently to that now. Or, you know, there are things I've perhaps learned and would say a little differently or with a different emphasis. So, yeah, there's no going back through. This person did a lot of research. And thank goodness, because, you know, I remember being in certain places in certain areas, but the names of places, it's difficult to put it all together. There was so much.
And it was about being very raw and honest about the journey too, because I spent a lot of time, many of you will have seen Rosie speak. I've seen Rosie speak, and she's an incredibly dynamic and powerful speaker. But when she walks out the door of the building, there's another side that Rosie has to deal with. So we wanted the book to be very honest and open and raw, so that people really did understand, you know, what life is like. I think it's very easy for us to forget why we know Rosie in the first place, and dealing with that trauma and that healing and that sense of purpose was really important.
But I also want people to, you know, who may be drawn to reading the book because their life is challenging, or there is levels of unhappiness, or something that is unresolved, and something that's, you know, people are drawn to reading the book, and they will know why. And I want people to know that, you know, recovery isn't linear. Like, there are, you know, I will always have some sadness, but I can live with that. And one of the women I met many years ago now, I was with my first book. I was signing her book, and she reached and she said, I lost my children too. And I looked at her and I said, am I going to be okay? And she said, Rosie, you learn to live with it. And I've always remembered. And that meant, that was like, oh, if she can do it, I can do it. And I know that that's what I have been to some people as well. And so you know, it's for people to understand and realise through the very openness and honest reflections, I hope that people also feel that gives them not permission, but they can feel that they're okay too.
I know there are a lot of you that would still like to ask questions, and I'm really sorry, but we are actually out of time. This has been a wonderful, extraordinary event. Please
Thank
thank
you.
Rosie.
Thank you. Thank you.